The rumor that would not die. There was a quiet moment in the middle of a long afternoon when Sandra finally understood that the rumor everyone kept whispering about was not going to disappear on its own. She had lived many years under bright lights, interviews, red carpets, and questions she had learned to dodge with grace, but this one felt different. It was slow and heavy, like a shadow stretching across her life. People online talked about it as if they knew the truth better than she did, adding their own stories and theories until the whole thing felt like a storm she could not outrun. She had always believed that silence was a kind of shield, that staying calm would protect the parts of her life that were too fragile to be exposed. But the rumor grew louder each day, filling her inbox, her social media feed, and even the quiet corners of conversations between strangers who thought they were invisible. She felt a pressure in her chest every time she opened her phone, a fear that maybe this time the story had twisted into something even farther from reality. She had always tried to give kindness, even when life tested her, but now she wondered if kindness was enough to stop a wave this big. She sat alone, thinking about the one person who might understand the weight of this, the one person whose name was tied to hers even though neither of them had asked for it. And that name, floating unwanted through rumor-filled rooms and online threads, belonged to Keanu. In those first minutes of facing the storm directly, she remembered the day they met, long before the world tried to glue their lives together like pieces of a puzzle that did not actually fit. She remembered a warmth in his eyes, a gentleness that did not demand attention or praise. There was something quiet about him, something that made her feel safe even though they barely knew each other then. But as much as she respected him, as much as she appreciated the kind of person he was, she never expected their connection to become the center of such loud public curiosity. And yet the rumor kept circling back, as if the world needed it to be true, as if their own imaginations were stronger than anything she could ever say. She felt torn between protecting her privacy and protecting him from the false stories that dragged his name through places he never wanted to be. What hurt her most was the possibility that people might think he was someone he was not. She knew how much he valued honesty. She knew how quietly he carried his griefs, his hopes, and his resilience. She feared that the spreading stories would take away the dignity he had worked so hard to guard. As the hours passed and the sun dipped lower, the pressure inside her kept tightening, making it harder to breathe. She found herself pacing the room, touching the edges of furniture as if grounding herself. She knew she could not continue pretending everything was fine. Her friends had started asking questions too, not because they believed the rumors, but because they worried about her. Some offered to help her craft a statement, others suggested she ignore everything and trust the noise to fade. But Sandra felt something different this time, something sharper. Maybe it was her age, or the weight of so many years spent fending off gossip, or the fear that silence would let lies grow into something irreversible. Whatever the reason, she felt a shift deep inside, a quiet but powerful certainty that she needed to speak. Not for fame or attention, not to spark drama or fan flames, but because there was a truth buried beneath years of misunderstanding, and she could no longer keep it locked away. She wanted to set herself free. She wanted to set him free too. She went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and sat at the table, breathing slowly as she prepared herself for what needed to come next. A voice deep inside whispered that telling the full story might change things forever. She did not know whether the world would listen. She did not know whether they would twist her words the way they had twisted everything else. But she felt the pull of honesty tugging at her, urging her to speak with the same compassion she had always tried to show the people she loved. She knew Keanu had his own fears, his own boundaries, his own long shadows from the past. She knew he had been through enough loss to last several lifetimes. She wondered if he would be upset that she was finally choosing to reveal what really happened. Maybe he would thank her. Maybe he would stay silent. Maybe he would disappear from her life forever. The uncertainty made her hands tremble slightly, but she held her glass tightly, grounding herself in the coolness of it. The truth, she thought, had been following them for years, waiting quietly in the background. It had never been scandalous or dramatic. It had never been the kind of thing tabloids wanted because it did not fit the mold of betrayal or secret romance or hidden drama. It was something gentler, something deeper, something built on quiet respect rather than anything the rumor mills wanted to sell. But that gentleness was also what made it so fragile, and she had kept it protected for so long that even thinking about revealing it felt like opening an old wound. She wondered if the world was even capable of understanding a truth that was not sensational. She wondered if people would be disappointed that the real story was not nearly as wild as the rumors. But somewhere inside her, she knew that the truth still mattered, even if it was quiet. As she stared at the empty wall across from her, She remembered a moment many years earlier, a moment she had not allowed herself to think about in a long time. It was the moment she had first realized that Keanu carried pain inside him that he rarely spoke about. She had seen it not in his words, but in his silences, in the small pauses he took before answering questions, in the way his eyes softened when he talked about people he had lost. She wondered if the world would ever understand that kind of strength, the kind that grows quietly through suffering. She had always respected him for that more than anything else, and maybe that respect was part of the truth she was now ready to share. But she needed to be careful. She did not want to expose wounds that were not hers to show. She needed to find a balance that honored both of them, something honest but gentle. She reached for her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found his name. Her finger hovered over it. She felt her heartbeat quicken. She knew that once she pressed that call button, there would be no going back. She wondered if he already knew about the rumor spreading again. He probably did. He was calm about these things on the surface, but she knew they bothered him more than he admitted. Maybe he was waiting for her to call. Maybe he hoped she would stay silent. Maybe he did not know what to feel anymore. She closed her eyes, inhaled, and exhaled slowly. Her finger finally tapped the screen. And at the exact moment the call began to ring, something happened that made her blood run cold. A message appeared at the top of her phone, a message from an unknown number, a message with words she had not expected to see, words that stopped her breath mid-inhale. Because it said, "Do not tell him, you don't know the whole truth." And in that instant, everything inside her shifted, opening the door to a part of the story she never knew existed for a long moment. Sandra just stared at the message glowing on her screen, unable to move or blink. It felt as if the air in the room had thickened, like the world around her had paused in silence, waiting for her reaction. The words were simple, but the meaning behind them carried a weight she could not ignore. She felt a chill creep slowly down her spine as she read the message again and again, hoping that maybe she had misunderstood it, hoping that maybe her mind was playing tricks on her. But the words stayed exactly the same, cold and direct, as if they were carved into the screen itself. She wondered who had sent it, how they had got her number, and most of all, what they meant by saying she did not know the whole truth. For years she had carried her own version of the truth deep inside her, believing that it was complete, believing that she understood everything that had happened between her and Keanu. But now, with one unexpected message, that certainty began to crack. She had not expected to feel fear today, but fear was exactly what was rising inside her, subtle but persistent, like a quiet alarm she could not turn off. The phone was still ringing in her hand, Keanu's name glowing softly beneath the message, but she did not know whether to answer it. Her heart pulled her in two different directions. Part of her wanted to tell him everything, to call out his name and listen to the sound of his calm voice, hoping it would steady her. But another part of her felt the warning in the message digging deeper, urging her to stop, to wait, to question things she had never questioned before. She hesitated until the call finally stopped on its own, leaving her alone with the silence and the message that refused to disappear from her thoughts. The room felt smaller now, as if the walls were inching closer in slow, invisible steps. She placed the phone on the table and rubbed her hands together, trying to chase away the uneasy trembling in her fingers. She told herself to focus, to breathe, to stay grounded, but her mind kept racing in circles, returning to the message like a magnet. She wondered whether someone was trying to scare her. It would not be the first time someone tried to insert themselves into her personal life through lies or threats. Fame had never protected her from fear. Sometimes it made fear louder. But something about this message felt different from the usual noise. It was too specific, too perfectly timed, arriving right as she chose to finally face the truth she had avoided for so long. It felt like someone had been watching her, waiting for the exact moment she would reach out to Keanu. Maybe it was someone who knew both of them. Maybe it was someone who had been part of the story from the very beginning. She did not want to think that, but the uncertainty gnawed at her. She picked up the phone again and opened the message details, hoping to find a clue. The number was unfamiliar, a string of digits with no name, no location, no history. It was as if it had appeared out of thin air. She tried calling it, but the call ended immediately with a strange clicking sound, like a door slamming shut before she even had the chance to knock. She tried again, and the same thing happened. Her heart beat faster as she realized that whoever had sent the message did not want to talk. They only wanted to warn her, or threaten her, or manipulate her, she could not tell which. She leaned back in her chair and stared at the ceiling, trying to calm her thoughts long enough to understand the situation clearly. She had always lived her life with a steady sense of intuition, trusting her gut when it whispered warnings or offered reassurance. Today, that intuition felt torn in half. One half told her that the message was a lie, a trick meant to confuse her. The other half whispered that maybe she truly did not know the whole story. Maybe there were pieces missing that she had never seen before, pieces hidden by silence, memory, or time. She hated the thought that she might have misunderstood something so important, something tied to a person she had always cared about. Trying to escape the tension building inside her, she stood and walked across the room, pacing slowly as her mind drifted back to the earliest days of her connection with Keanu. She remembered the long hours on set, the way he listened more than he spoke, the way he offered kindness without expecting anything in return. She had admired him quietly, not because he was famous, but because he seemed to move through life with a sense of humility that was rare in their world. He never bragged. He never sought attention. He never used his pain as an excuse to treat others badly. She had always seen something steady and resilient in him, something that reminded her of a tree growing alone on a hill, battered by wind but still standing strong. And she had respected him for that more deeply than she ever told him. But the message now made her wonder if there was a part of his story she never knew. She had always assumed that the truth between them was simple, built on small moments and shared experiences, shaped by mutual respect. But what if there was something else? What if someone else had been part of the story? What if there was a reason the rumor would not die, a reason hidden beneath things she thought she understood? She felt the uneasy flutter of doubt growing inside her. She returned to the table, picked up the phone again, and stared at Keanu's name in her call history. She knew he was probably wondering why she had called. He might even call her back any minute. She needed to decide what to do before that happened. She needed to decide whether to tell him about the message or keep it secret until she understood it better. She feared that telling him right away might make him worry or push him away. He valued privacy so much, and she did not want to add chaos to his life. But keeping the message to herself also felt dangerous. If it meant something important, he deserved to know. But what if telling him put him at risk? Or what if the message meant something personal about him, something she was not supposed to uncover yet? Her thoughts spiraled in too many directions at once, and she had to place the phone down again just to steady her hands. She pressed her fingertips against her temples, willing herself to stop overthinking. She needed clarity, not fear. She needed to understand the message, the meaning behind it, and the reason it stopped her cold. She tried to remember every moment she had shared with Keanu that might hint at something she had missed. She tried to recall every expression he had ever made that might contain hidden pain, hidden truth, hidden regret. But the memories were blurry, slipping through her mind like soft shadows. Then in a sudden rush, another memory surfaced, one she had pushed to the back of her mind long ago. It was from a night years earlier when they were both younger and overwhelmed by the pressures around them. She had found him sitting alone backstage after an event, his expression far heavier than usual. He looked like he had been carrying a secret, something that weighed down his entire body. She remembered the way he exhaled slowly, as if releasing years of tension, before telling her in a quiet voice that there were parts of his life he did not talk about, parts he hoped no one would ever dig up. He had not said it dramatically or fearfully. He had simply spoken like someone who knew the world was not always kind to people who spoke their truth. At the time, she had respected his boundaries and never asked for details. She believed that everyone deserved to keep certain pieces of themselves private. But now that memory came back with sharp clarity, making her wonder if the message was connected to whatever he had been talking about that night. Maybe someone knew the truth he had tried to protect. Maybe someone wanted to use it now, twisting it into something dark and dangerous. Or maybe someone wanted to warn her before she accidentally stepped into something she was not prepared for. Her phone vibrated suddenly, making her jump. She grabbed it with a mixture of dread and hope. It was not Keanu this time. It was another message from the same unknown number. Her heartbeat quickened as she opened it, bracing herself for more unsettling words. The new message said, "If you talk to him now, you might lose him. Wait until you know why." Her hands trembled as she read the message. Her pulse echoed loudly in her ears. The meaning of those words twisted inside her like a knot tightening around her heart. They did not sound like a threat. They sounded like a warning. A strange, almost protective warning. But who would send something like that? Who cared enough to warn her but not enough to reveal their identity? Who believed that talking to him now could cause damage? She felt her breath grow shallow as she tried to untangle the meaning. She wondered if something had happened in his life recently, something she did not know about. She wondered if someone else was involved in whatever truth was being hinted at. She wondered if she had been blind to something important. Fear mixed with confusion, but underneath it all was something even stronger, determination. She wanted to know the truth, the whole truth, not the fragments she had carried alone for years. She stood up again, her pace faster now as she moved around the room, trying to gather the courage to make the next decision. She felt a pull inside her, a quiet voice telling her that she needed to dig deeper before going to him. She needed to understand the message, the sender, and the hidden parts of the story that were beginning to rise to the surface. She needed to protect him, even if she did not yet know what she was protecting him from. She typed back to the unknown number, her fingers trembling slightly across the screen. She asked a simple question, the only question she could manage without revealing her panic. "What truth are you talking about?" She pressed send, then waited, her stomach twisting with tension. The seconds crawled by slowly, each one heavier than the last. She stared at the phone so intensely that her eyes burned. She whispered to herself that she needed to stay calm, that she needed to trust her instincts. But her instincts were torn between fear and curiosity, and she did not know which side to follow. Finally, after what felt like several minutes, the phone vibrated in her hand. She inhaled sharply, bracing herself before opening the message. When she saw the words, a wave of cold washed through her body. "The truth he never told you, the truth he thought he buried." She sat down, feeling her knees weaken. The message had cracked open something deep inside her, stirring emotions she did not even know she still carried. She felt fear, sadness, disbelief, and something else she could not yet name. The idea that Keanu had hidden something important from her, something he believed he had buried, made her heart ache in a way she could not fully understand. She did not know if it was betrayal or empathy she was feeling. She only knew that the story she thought she understood had just changed forever. She looked around her quiet home, realizing that nothing felt familiar anymore. Everything felt different now, as if the past and present were shifting, revealing secrets that had been waiting in silence. She closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing, but the message echoed through her mind like a haunting whisper. She needed answers. She needed to know what truth had been hidden from her all these years. She needed to understand before she made the next move. And just as she reached for her phone again, preparing to push deeper into the mystery, the screen lit up. This time with a call. From Keanu. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at his name glowing softly on the screen, knowing that picking up the call might change everything. And not picking it up might change even more the moment Sandra saw his name glowing on her screen. She felt her entire body freeze, as if time itself had pressed pause. The phone vibrated softly in her hand, steady and persistent, every pulse reminding her of the choice she had to make. She knew that letting the call go unanswered would only build a wall between them, a wall made of confusion and suspicion. But answering it felt just as dangerous, especially now that the mysterious messages had carved so much doubt into her heart. She stared at the phone until her vision blurred slightly, torn between instinct and fear. The fear was new. She had never feared talking to him before. Their conversations had always been easy, warm, honest, filled with a kind of quiet understanding that made everything else around them feel less complicated. But now there was a shadow between them, a truth she did not know, a secret someone claimed he had buried. As the phone continued to ring, she tried to imagine what he might say. Maybe he was calling because he felt her tension earlier when she had tried dialing him. Maybe he just wanted to check on her, the way he sometimes did when something in the air felt unsettled. Or maybe he already knew the rumor was spreading again, and he wanted to reassure her that they could weather it together. He had always had that calmness about him, that ability to soften storms without even raising his voice. But now she wondered if there was something else behind the call, something heavier, something tied to the secret she was suddenly being warned about. The phone rang one last time before the sound cut off abruptly. The silence that followed felt even louder, like the entire room was holding its breath. She set the phone on the table slowly, her fingers lingering on it for a moment as if hoping it might vibrate again. But it didn't. Her mind filled with 100 questions she could not answer. She knew she could not go on like this, trapped in a spiral of uncertainty. She needed to understand the message, the sender, and the truth they were hinting at. But she also needed to face him eventually, because whatever truth this was, it belonged to both of them now. To steady herself, she walked toward the living room window, letting the soft afternoon light fall across her face. She took a deep breath and tried to calm the storm inside her. She reminded herself that she had known Keanu for years, that he was not the kind of person who lied easily or hurt others intentionally. She wanted to trust him, but trust felt fragile now, shaken by the unknown. She watched the world outside her window, people moving through their day unaware of the turmoil she was stuck in. It felt strange to see such normalcy when her own life felt like it was unraveling thread by thread. She pressed her forehead gently against the cool glass, closing her eyes as she tried to gather strength. The vibration of her phone startled her again, but this time it was not a call. It was another message from the same unknown sender. She hesitated before opening it, afraid of what new fear it might spark. But curiosity and dread pushed her hand forward until the message filled the screen. He is calling because he senses something is wrong. If you answer now, he will tell you everything except what matters most. Wait. Sandra felt her breath catch in her throat as she read the message. It didn't make sense. Why would someone warn her to wait? Why would talking to him now be dangerous? Her heart pounded as she tried to process it. She felt as if she were standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure whether the ground beneath her was solid or about to crumble. The message was too confident, too certain, as if the sender knew exactly what Keanu would or would not say. It gave her chills to think that someone out there believed they understood him better than she did. She typed back quickly this time, her frustration bubbling to the surface. She did not want to be manipulated. She demanded to know who they were, why they were sending these warnings, and what truth they were trying so hard to hint at without revealing. She hit send and waited, pacing the room as her thoughts tangled tightly. She could feel her patience wearing thin. The tension had become unbearable, stretching her nerves like wires pulled too tight. The reply came faster than she expected. I cannot tell you who I am yet, but I can tell you this. Something happened years ago that he never wanted you to discover. He believed it was over, but it has resurfaced, and now it could harm both of you if you act without knowing. Her heart dropped. The words felt heavy, almost suffocating. The idea that a part of his past had returned, something important enough that he thought it was better buried forever, made her stomach twist with anxiety. She wondered what it could be, something personal, something painful, something involving their connection. She felt fear mixing with sorrow because she realized that whatever this truth was, it might change the way she saw him, not because she expected scandal, but because she knew that hidden pain could change a person in ways even they didn't recognize. She needed answers, but the sender refused to give anything specific. It felt like they were holding the story just out of her reach, forcing her to stay in a place of tension and doubt. She wanted to scream from the frustration. She wanted to shake the phone until it revealed something more, something she could hold on to. But all she had were vague warnings and her own racing thoughts. As she stood in the middle of the room, trying to understand this impossible situation, memories began rising again from the depths of her mind. Moments she had forgotten, moments that suddenly felt important now. She remembered another night long ago, one they had shared quietly after filming had ended for the day. She had found him sitting on the edge of a small wooden platform, looking out into the darkness with an expression she had never seen before. When she sat beside him, he didn't speak at first. He just breathed slowly, as if gathering courage. Then he told her that sometimes the hardest truths were the ones we kept from the people we cared about the most. He said it softly, almost sadly. She had thought he was talking about grief, about loss, about the emotional scars he carried. She had placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and told him that everyone had burdens they weren't ready to share. She never pushed him. She thought she was protecting his peace. But now she wondered if that moment had been the first sign of the truth he had buried. Maybe he had been trying to open the door to it back then, but fear had silenced him. Or maybe he had hoped she would never look inside. The thought made her heart ache, because if he had carried something heavy alone for all these years, she wished he had trusted her enough to share it. She felt pain for him, not anger. But she also felt fear about what this truth might mean for them now. She sat back down, feeling the weight of the situation pulling at her like gravity. She thought carefully, trying to figure out whether the warning messages were meant to protect her or manipulate her. She knew she should not blindly trust an unknown source. But she also knew that something about the timing and the tone felt eerily aligned with the memories resurfacing in her mind. She needed more information. She needed a direction. She needed someone who knew the past better than she did. Then, like a spark in her mind, she realized there was one person who had been there during the early days, one person who knew both of them well, one person who had seen things neither of them noticed. Someone who might understand what truth had been buried. Her phone lit up again, but this time the message was different. It wasn't from the unknown number. It was from a friend she hadn't heard from in years. The message said, "We need to talk, it's about Keanu." Her breath stopped. Her heart pounded against her ribs. She felt the world tilt slightly, as if she had just stepped into the start of something much bigger than she expected. And as she stared at the message in silence, Her phone buzzed once more, this time with a notification she never thought she would see. A voice message from the same unknown sender. And the preview text read, "This is something he never meant for you to hear, the voice she was never meant to hear." Sandra stared at the new notification as if it were a living thing, something fragile and dangerous all at once. The tiny icon next to the message glowed softly, almost innocent, yet it carried a weight that pressed down on her chest. She swallowed hard as she stared at the preview text. "This is something he never meant for you to hear." Her fingers hovered above the screen, trembling slightly. She felt her heart pounding in her ears, her breathing shallow and uneven like her body was bracing for impact before her mind even understood why. She had expected more cryptic words, maybe another warning, maybe another threat disguised as advice. But a voice message felt different. It felt final. It felt like a line she could not uncross. Once she listened, she would never be able to go back to not knowing. The room around her felt too quiet, too still. The air carried a heaviness that made her skin prickle. She thought of calling Keanu again, of asking him directly what truth he had buried. But something inside her whispered that she could not confront him without knowing what she was up against. She had always tried to be fair, to speak with kindness, to wait for the right moment. But now she felt trapped, tangled between fear and love, between caution and desperation. She needed to hear the message. She needed to understand why someone was so determined to stop her from talking to him. She tapped the notification slowly, her thumb hesitating for just an instant before the screen opened to reveal the voice message waiting for her, a small waveform pulsing gently as if breathing. She held the phone close to her chest for a moment, grounding herself. She whispered softly to the empty room that she had to be strong, that she had carried difficult truths before and survived them, that she could do it again. Then, with a deep breath that barely reached her lungs, she pressed play. The message began with a faint static hum, like the sound of someone adjusting a microphone or shifting a phone against fabric. She held her breath, waiting for the voice, unsure if it would sound familiar or foreign. When it finally came through the speaker, her stomach tightened instantly. The voice was low and calm, but there was a strain beneath the surface, a tension that made the hairs on her arms stand up. It did not belong to Keanu, that much she knew right away. But it belonged to someone who knew him well enough to speak with conviction, someone who carried a heaviness that echoed in every word. "You don't know me," the voice began, steady but sharp. "And you are not supposed to, but I know him. I knew him before the world did, before the stories, before the fame. I knew the parts of him he never let anyone see. He has tried to protect you from this for years, maybe because he thinks you deserve better than the truth. Maybe because he believes himself unworthy of your trust. But you need to understand that what you think you know about him is only a piece of the story. The rest. He buried it because he thought it died with the past." Sandra's heart pounded faster with each word. She felt her throat tighten, her breath caught somewhere between fear and heartbreak. She wanted to stop listening, but she couldn't. The voice had hooked her, pulling her deeper into a story she hadn't even known existed. The speaker paused in the message, drawing in a long, shaky breath before continuing. "I'm not telling you this to hurt him. I'm telling you because keeping the secret any longer will hurt both of you. He hasn't told you what happened the night he disappeared all those years ago. He let everyone believe it was just exhaustion or grief or the pressure of everything he carried. But that wasn't the truth. Something happened, something that changed him, something he fears could destroy the way you see him." Sandra felt her pulse quicken. She knew the night being referenced. She remembered the sudden silence, the rumors, the worry in everyone's eyes. She remembered hearing whispers that he had gone off-grid for a few days, unreachable, leaving people confused and scared. She had asked him about it once, gently, but he had brushed it off with a calm smile and a quiet "it was nothing, just needed space." She had believed him. She had wanted to believe him. She thought she was respecting his boundaries. But now, hearing the voice speak with such certainty, she felt a cold ripple of doubt spread through her chest. The message continued, the voice tightening slightly as if the memory itself weighed heavy. He met someone that night, someone from his past who carried a truth he had spent years running from, a truth he never wanted to face again. I can't give you all the details yet, not until you are ready, but you need to know that what happened that night did not end there. It followed him quietly for years, and now it has returned. That rumor going around isn't random, it's the beginning of something resurfacing. Something he hoped would stay buried forever. Sandra felt her breathing grow uneven, her hands going cold as she tried to absorb the meaning behind those words. She whispered softly to herself, asking the empty room what truth could possibly be so heavy, so damaging, that he believed she would see him differently because of it. She had known him for so long, had shared so many moments of quiet honesty with him. He had always seemed gentle, humble, grounded. What could have happened that night that would haunt him still? What truth could he be so afraid to reveal? The voice softened in the message, becoming almost sorrowful. You think he is strong because he carries pain with grace, but you don't know the whole weight he holds. He wants to protect you from it, even now. That's why he will lie if you talk to him today. He will tell you everything except the thing that matters. He doesn't want to lose you, but if you don't know the truth, you both might lose much more. The message ended abruptly after that, the final words fading into silence like a thread cut too short. Sandra sat frozen, holding the phone in both trembling hands, her eyes staring blankly at the screen. She replayed the entire message in her mind, each sentence weaving into the next until her thoughts became just as tangled as her emotions. She felt fear. She felt confusion. She felt heartbreak, not because of betrayal, but because of the deep pain she sensed behind the warning. She felt a wave of protectiveness rise inside her, mixed with a rising determination to understand everything, no matter how painful the truth might be. She stood up slowly, feeling as if her legs had turned to water, and walked toward the center of the room. She pressed her hand against her chest, trying to calm her racing heart. She whispered his name softly, not in anger, but in sorrow and longing. She had always known there were corners of his life he kept tucked away, places touched by loss and fear. But this felt bigger, deeper, darker. Her phone vibrated in her hand again, jolting her from her thoughts. She looked down, expecting another message from the unknown sender. But instead, she saw something that made her heart stop completely. It was a message from her old friend, the one who had said, "We need to talk, it's about Keanu." And now the new message said, "I know what happened that night, and I think you're finally ready to hear it." As Sandra stared at those words, her lungs tightened and her thoughts scattered. She felt the world shift again beneath her feet, as if she were standing at the edge of a truth she could not unlearn. But before she could respond, before she could even take a full breath, her phone lit up with one more notification. This time a photo sent by the unknown number. A photo taken years ago, a photo of him. And he was not alone in it. The photo appeared on Sandra's screen so suddenly, so sharply, that for a moment she forgot how to breathe. The image was grainy, softened by age, but clear enough to feel like a punch to the chest. She stared at it, her heart thundering, her mind struggling to make sense of what she was seeing. The photo showed Keanu much younger, maybe from a time long before their paths had crossed. His face carried a softness she had almost forgotten he once had, a kind of innocence mixed with quiet hope. But it wasn't his expression that made her stomach twist, it was the person standing beside him. A woman, someone she had never seen before. Someone whose face was turned, slightly toward him with a familiarity that made Sandra's pulse quicken. The woman's hand rested lightly on his arm, not possessive, not romantic, but protective, like someone who understood him deeply, someone who had stood beside him through something heavy. Even through the faded colors and old shadows, Sandra could sense a connection between them. One that felt too natural to be casual. One that carried a story she had never heard. Her throat tightened as she tried to analyze every detail. The background, the way their bodies were angled, the quiet gravity in their expressions. They didn't look like two people posing for a camera. They looked like two people locked in a moment that mattered. She zoomed in on the woman's face, searching for recognition. Something about her eyes seemed familiar, not in a personal way, but in a way that suggested she had seen pain, the kind that leaves lasting marks beneath the surface. Sandra felt her heart ache unexpectedly, as if she were witnessing a chapter of his life he had never shared, a chapter shaped by loss, trust, or something even deeper. Her fingers trembled as she stared at the screen. She felt torn between shock and empathy, confusion and sorrow. She wondered why he had kept this person hidden from her all these years, not because their relationship looked romantic, it didn't, but because it looked important, deeply important. Sandra felt a rising ache inside her, not out of jealousy, but out of the painful realization that there was a part of his life he had never trusted her with. She had always believed they shared an unspoken honesty, a quiet understanding built over years of knowing each other. But now she saw how much of his heart still lived in places she had never been allowed to see. As she stood frozen with the phone in her hand, another message arrived from the unknown number, each word hitting like a stone dropping into still water. This is the woman who tried to warn him, the woman he thought he could forget, the woman who carries the other half of the truth. Sandra's breath caught. She read the message again, her chest tightening. The other half of the truth. The phrase echoed in her mind like a haunting whisper. She wanted to demand answers. She wanted to shout at the unknown sender, at the universe, at herself for not seeing any of this earlier. She wanted to protect him, understand him, confront him, hold him, distance herself from him. Every emotion collided inside her at once, leaving her dizzy. And then, almost as if fate had been waiting for the perfect, cruel moment, her phone vibrated again. It was her old friend. She opened the message, feeling tension crawl along her skin. "I recognize that woman. I didn't think you'd ever see that photo. Call me now." Sandra felt her knees weaken. She lowered herself into a chair before her legs could give out completely. She held the phone close, staring at the messages, the photo, the warnings, everything swirling together into a storm of confusion. She wanted to ignore the unknown sender. She wanted to trust her friend instead. But she also feared that both held only fragments of a bigger truth, fragments she didn't know how to piece together yet. Her friend sent another message almost immediately, as if sensing her hesitation. "I was with him that night, the night he disappeared. I know why he never spoke about it. I know who she was to him, and I know what it cost him." The air left Sandra's lungs. She felt tears sting her eyes, not from heartbreak, not from anger, but from the overwhelming weight of everything she didn't know. She whispered his name under her breath, her voice shaking. She thought of his gentle smile, his quiet strength, the way he carried pain like it was something sacred. She thought of how often she had sensed shadows behind his calmness, but never pushed him to reveal more. She wiped her eyes quickly and focused on the screen again, taking a deep breath as she considered calling her friend. But before she could tap the call button, her phone lit up again with yet another message, this time from the unknown number. The words were more urgent now, almost trembling. "Do not call them yet. You're not ready. You don't understand the danger." "Danger?" The words slammed into her chest. Her breathing went shallow as she read on. "What happened that night did not end with him. It did not end with her, and if you take one wrong step, it will not end with you either." She felt her whole body tense, her heart hammering against her ribs. Her mind raced. Danger? From what? From whom? The message offered no explanation, no clarity, only fear wrapped in uncertainty. She typed back, her frustration breaking through her fear. "Tell me what happened. Stop warning me and just tell me." She pressed send with a mix of anger and desperation. But the response came quickly, short and chilling. "I can't, not yet. If I tell you everything now, you'll walk straight into the same trap he did." Sandra read the words, confused and terrified, her mind buzzing with questions she couldn't control. She felt as if she were standing on the edge of something enormous and dangerous, something that had been quietly growing behind her without her knowing. And then, as she stared at her phone, it vibrated one more time. A single message, simple and devastating. From Keanu. It said, "We need to talk. I know you've seen the photo." Sandra's heart stopped. How did he know? Who told him? Was he watching the messages somehow? She stared at his words, her entire body trembling. And before she could respond, before she could even gather her thoughts, another message from him appeared. One that changed everything in an instant. "I never wanted you to find out like this. The woman in the photo, she didn't survive what happened that night. The truth beneath the ashes." Sandra felt the room tilt as she stared at his message, her breath thinning until she wasn't sure she was breathing at all. The words echoed inside her, each one hitting like a slow, heavy strike. She didn't survive what happened that night. It didn't feel real. It didn't feel possible. She pressed her palm against her chest as if trying to hold her heart in place. She whispered the words aloud, but they only sounded more devastating. She imagined the woman in the photo, the gentle eyes, the protective hand on his arm, the quiet heaviness between them. She had looked alive in the picture, alive and strong, someone who carried a story of her own. And now Sandra was learning that the woman's story had ended in a way she could barely comprehend. Questions filled her mind in waves. Who was she? Why hadn't he told her? Why had everyone been silent all these years? Why had this truth stayed buried beneath layers of quiet sorrow and unspoken fear? Her hands trembled as she hovered over the screen, unsure whether to reply, call him, or sit with the silence until her mind steadied. But she couldn't stay still. Not now. She needed to talk to him. She needed to hear the truth from his own voice, not through warnings or cryptic messages or old memories. She typed slowly, her fingers shaky. "I saw the photo. I heard the message. I need you to tell me what happened." She didn't expect a quick response, but almost instantly her phone buzzed. His reply was short, stripped of calm charm or soft humor. It felt like raw honesty, trembling at the edges. "I'm coming over. I can't do this through messages." Sandra stared at the words, a mix of fear and relief flooding her. She understood why he wanted to speak face to face. Some truths were too heavy for screens, too fragile for typed words. She placed the phone down and took a long breath, grounding herself as she waited. The house felt different now, too quiet, too small, like the walls were listening. She paced slowly, her mind replaying the voice message, the warnings, the photo, her friend's messages, everything twisting together in a tangled web she still didn't fully understand. When the doorbell rang, the sound cut through the silence like a blade. She hesitated a moment before walking toward the door. She opened it slowly, and there he stood, older, quieter, carrying a weight in his eyes she had never seen so clearly before. He offered a faint, tired smile, but it disappeared quickly, washed away by the seriousness of the moment. "Can I come in?" he asked softly. She stepped aside, and he walked in with cautious steps, as if afraid the floor might shift beneath him. Once inside, he paused, looking around the room as though searching for the courage he had left scattered across the years. He turned toward her, his eyes filled with a deep sadness, but also with something else, something like longing for understanding, longing for forgiveness. "I didn't want it to happen like this," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "I didn't want you to find out through strangers or half-truths. I wanted to protect you from it. Maybe that was wrong." She folded her arms gently, more to hold herself together than anything else. "Who was she asked, "and what happened that night?" He took a slow breath and walked to the edge of the living room, stopping near the window where the fading light painted soft shadows across his face. It was the first time she saw him look his age, not physically, but emotionally, as if years of silent grief had finally surfaced. "Her name was Mara," he began, speaking as though the name itself was a fragile memory he needed to hold carefully. "We met long before I became someone the world recognized. She understood me. She understood the parts of me that were still trying to find peace. We went through something difficult together, something painful." He paused, closing his eyes briefly before continuing. "But the night I disappeared, that night we argued. Not because we stopped caring about each other, but because she wanted to protect me in a way I didn't understand at the time. She had information, dangerous information, about someone we trusted, someone who had been manipulating things around us. She warned me, begged me to stay away, to walk away before it was too late." Sandra felt chills race down her arms. She remembered the warnings, the messages, the phrases about danger and traps. "I didn't listen," he said quietly. "I thought she was scared, confused. I told her we should talk in the morning." His voice cracked slightly, the pain in it raw and unfiltered. "But she didn't make it to morning." Sandra's breath caught. She stepped closer but stopped herself, unsure if he wanted comfort or distance. "They said it was an accident," he continued. "The officials insisted. The press never found out, but I knew it wasn't random, because the same person Mara tried to warn me about disappeared right after her death, and I couldn't prove anything. I couldn't protect her. I couldn't tell anyone the truth, and for years I carried the guilt alone." Emotion pressed heavily in Sandra's chest. She felt tears burn behind her eyes, not from fear, but from the overwhelming empathy she felt for him. She finally understood the weight he had carried, the silent sadness she had seen in moments when he thought no one was watching. "I kept her memory hidden," he whispered. "I kept that night buried because I didn't want it to pull me under, and I didn't want it to pull you under either. I didn't want my past to put you in danger." Sandra's voice trembled as she spoke. "But why now? Why are people sending me messages? Why are they warning me?" He opened his eyes, and they held a mix of fear and fierce protectiveness. "Because the person Mara warned me about, they're back, and they know you're important to me." Her lips parted, her pulse pounding. "Important how?" He hesitated, pain flickering across his expression. "More than you know, more than I ever said." Silence filled the room, heavy and tender at once. "They want something," he continued. "Something Mara kept hidden, something they think I have, and if they believe you can lead them to it, they will use you, manipulate you, scare you. Those messages you got, they might not all be from the same person. Some might be trying to protect you, others might be trying to control you." Sandra swallowed hard, fear curling inside her but not overpowering her. She felt an unexpected strength rising from someplace deep within her. "So what do we do now?" she asked. He looked at her with an expression filled with both fear and hope. We face the truth together, all of it, no more secrets. For a moment the world felt still, as if everything had led to this quiet, fragile, honest point. She stepped toward him slowly, her voice gentle but firm. Then start with this. Am I in danger because of you? He held her gaze, his eyes soft with regret. No, you're in danger because of how much you matter to me. Her breath caught, her heart shaking. Mara once told me, he continued, that truth can be the thing that destroys or the thing that saves. Back then, I wasn't brave enough to choose which one. But now, I want to choose, and I want to choose with you. Sandra reached out, placing her hand gently on his arm, the same place Mara had touched in the photo, but now filled with a new meaning, a new beginning. Then tell me everything, she said softly. No more hiding. His shoulders lowered as if a weight lifted, not entirely, but enough for him to breathe. I will, he whispered, and after that we decide together how this ends. And as they stood in the quiet glow of the fading light, a strange calm settled between them. Not the end of fear, not the end of danger, but the start of something stronger. Because the truth that had once broken him was now the truth they would face as one. And for the first time in years, he didn't have to carry the weight alone.